Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some big news regarding the current situation in Ukraine. Ukraine has agreed on terms of minerals deal with the United States. It's not going to be 500 billion. The key details have not yet been revealed on what the actual deal is. Remember, the Ukrainians were mystified at Trump's negotiation tactics. They don't know how to deal with it, but it's going to be a significant amount of rare earths and minerals going from Ukraine, and the United States is going to be able to have access to those, and that's going to be another asset for the U.S. And potentially the way Trump can swing this, and this is not even the best part of the news here today, but the way that Trump can swing this will be the Democrats wasted billions and billions and billions of dollars, and quite literally you could argue, yes, at least in the second half of this war, it's been wasted considering the front line is really not moved at all. You could have had Europe funding basically all of this and it wouldn't have changed. But Trump can say, I just got all of it back that the Democrats wasted in the rare earths and the minerals and the resources. And so this deal, we'll see what it ends up being in terms of 100 billion, 200 billion. Zelensky said, no, it's a grant, so we don't need to pay anything back. But it looks like that didn't end up working for him. This is something that I said speculated yesterday. I don't know if this is actually true, but it's based off of where the deposits are located. Many of the minerals and the rare earths that Trump wants are located in an area of Ukraine that right now is under Russian control. A lot of the minerals are on the far eastern side of the country. And so you can see Putin has just offered the U.S. a joint partnership to the rare earth minerals in the Donbass region. And so the idea would be the United States would tell Russia, all right, we're going to give you this land, but we need significant minerals out of it. And we've also got even more good news when you talk about possibly Trump pitting Russia against China, as opposed to what liberals were doing, where it was this East versus West thing, World War III, nuclear Holocaust scenario. Now Trump is pivoting Russia now that he's making inroads and there's going to be a potential economic relationship. I said yesterday the economic relationship was probably going to be something to do with this region and the minerals. It's an agreement to where the United States says, we're going to end this war because the U.S. has the power to do that based off of the funding that we give to Ukraine. And it's not even just that, it's also the United States and our involvement in NATO and these European countries understanding that if we want the war to be over and they don't want it to be over, that's going to be a big problem when it comes to us remaining in NATO. And so it's just kind of this leverage that we have over these European countries because of how strong our military, even if they don't want the war to be over. But European countries have come out and they've said, we want it to be over as well. A lot of the European countries do. And a lot of them don't want Ukraine to give up land. But at this point, it looks like it's going to be a deal. The regions that Russia currently has, there might be a little bit of an adjustment, but they're possibly going to take those. But the United States is going to say, well, listen, in the deal, we're going to need access to, as you can see, it says the original estimate Trump wanted was $500 billion in the minerals, but this area has around $7 trillion worth of minerals. That's what it's valued at. It's hard to extract. I'm not saying the United States is going to get $7 trillion worth, but you could be looking at a significant gain here. And this is stuff that never would have happened under Democrats. It's really great to see what Trump is doing when it comes to this Russia-Ukraine situation. Better than I even thought could have happened. I mean, you're pulling this off, and it's just based off of where the minerals are located. So many of the Ukrainian deposits are on the far eastern side, which is right now the region that's controlled by Russia. So Russia's like, listen, the United States, we have to end this. Putin's like, I can work with Trump. We can give you access to this. We know you've given up so much money for this. Let's avoid a massive war, and let's both have access to this. And then with Ukraine, their situation is that you would have an agreement where the United States would be on cordial terms with Russia, so Russia would not do a reinvasion of Ukraine. And also it would include Ukraine not joining NATO because you need that as a buffer state in general. So I think that's probably what the deal is going to be, but this isn't even like this is good news for sure, but we've got an even bigger thing right here, and it's just like an early inclination, but let's just take a look at this. China rejects U.S. President Trump's proposal to mutually cut military defense budgets by 50%. Putin recently said the proposal from Trump is a good idea. We know what's been happening with this war. There's been alienation, West versus East, liberals, American liberals pushing Russia closer to China, making Russia the number one enemy, saying the invasion was terrible. The worst case scenario is a strong new agreement, alliance between Russia and China. Trump is eliminating the possibility with this relationship he has with Putin. And now it looks like Russia is being a lot nicer to the United States. And you've got China saying, no, we're not going to cut our military defense budget at all. But Putin says it'd be a decent idea. We could see a little bit of cracks right now because you've seen what's been going on the past 4 or 5 years. Russia and China have had similar opinions. They've been moving closer to each other, but now Trump's come in and Trump's got this relationship with Putin to where you could sever this love affair. And it really wasn't a love affair, but I'm just saying it kind of makes sense if it is NATO and you look at how big our pact is, and we'll see if NATO ends up ending. I mean, the way Trump is trending, I'm not sure exactly. It's speculation, but Trump has serious problems with NATO. But it's like NATO against Russia, China, and other Eastern countries. That's not what we want. We don't want that. We want to avoid it. So this relationship Trump now has with Russia is driving a wedge in between Russia and China, as opposed to what liberals were doing, where they were saying Russia's horrible, and they were driving Russia towards China, and they were driving them closer. So this might be the whole big key when you've got the United States. And look, when it comes to cutting the military budget, that was always a ridiculous thing. I mean, Trump is going to be cutting the U.S. because you take a look at how much we spend on military and our debt and our deficit, it just makes sense. We're still going to be spending more than every other country by a long shot. This was just Trump kind of business savvy saying, well, if we're going to be cutting, because Trump was already planning on an 8% cut, let's try and get these other superpowers to cut and say it's like this peace deal. And Putin said, yeah, it's a good idea. Now, whether or not Putin really means that, still, you've got Putin saying it's a good idea. You've got China saying no. But it's like, this is an economic relationship now with Russia, and it really changes things as opposed to where we were with the liberal government here in the United States, where they were ramping up, they were ready, they wanted World War III, and Trump has just put an end to all of it. And so this is really why people voted for Trump. And now the situation you have is the United States has created inroads. They've created a relationship with Russia. They're going to be extracting hundreds of billions of dollars in minerals as a repayment in the eastern Ukraine regions, as a repayment for the amount of money we've given Ukraine for this war. And we've enabled ourselves to have this relationship now with Russia. And now there's a wedge in between Russia and China possibly, or at least they're not driven closer to each other because it's become the kind of an East versus West thing because of this war between Russia and Ukraine. So Trump has done this, and he's really moved the needle in terms of our relationships, and we'll see what happens with NATO. It's hard to say whether or not Trump would leave NATO. The European countries, I believe, realize this was something that it doesn't even have to do with Trump. It more so has to do with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It kind of woke a lot of them up and said, maybe we do need to allocate more money to defense spending. And we recently just saw, as a peace deal gets closer, the UK give their biggest deal yet to Ukraine, which is around $6.6 billion in military aid going to Ukraine, because the United States has pretty much stopped sending aid to Ukraine. But now if they've got a deal, presumably the aid's going to continue. And a lot of this is Ukraine realizing they need the United States to be on their side. But at this point, it seems pretty clear there's an agreement between Russia and the United States to where the United States gets minerals from that region that Russia currently controls after their invasion, which is under government administration right now by Russia, the Donbass region. And so this is amazing news. Trump has avoided World War III. Trump now, we don't have an alienated Russia. And listen, Putin is unpredictable. You can't trust him. But things are looking better in terms of the U.S.-Russian relations. And whether or not you think the invasion was good or bad, we can't really... That happened under Biden. I mean, what do you want us to do about that? There's really nothing that Trump can do. He's just trying to end the current war. And again, you're like, well, Ukrainians are fighting for their country, but this is a war that's at a standstill, And this requires the adults in the room to come to a table and to stop these young men from dying needlessly because the front line has not moved significantly in the last year and a half. That's really all that Trump is saying. And now Trump's expected to get huge deposits of rare earths and minerals out of that eastern region. Yeah, this is probably going to push Trump's approval rating like 75%. I mean, once people realize this, and now there's potentially this relationship with Russia, they're like, oh, he's a Russian agent. They have to say that because they're pissed off that Trump can get along with Putin and avoid these massive wars. So they have to cope with it and say, well, he's just a Russian agent. Remember, they tried saying that back in 2016. They had a 3-year investigation, hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money wasted because the Democrats had a vendetta. They failed impeachment attempt because of the Ukraine phone call. It's just all so pathetic. And Trump's out here, at this point, really stopping the alienization of Russia. And now the U.S. is in a better spot with Russia. And now you've got Russia possibly saying, we don't mind the U.S. and maybe China is the big bad guy if the United States can have cordial relations. And listen, we still want to have good relations with Europe. I think what Trump wants is a more individualistic deal with certain European countries rather than being obligated to defend every single, including the smaller European countries. That's when it becomes a problem. The issue with NATO is, with Article 5, if a smaller country within NATO gets invaded, it immediately beckons in a massive war because the United States, the number one biggest superpower, would immediately be directly involved because of Article 5. And you can say, well, that's good because it's a deterrent. Like, well, now Russia's not going to invade a NATO country because they know they're going to have to face the United States. But the problem is that immediately escalates it to the point to where we could be talking about nuclear war because the number one biggest superpower is now involved immediately because of an invasion of a small country. And it's like, this is a different type of thing now with these nuclear bombs. And Russia always is, that's really their bluff. They do threaten the nuclear bombs a lot. They can do that because they know that that's their leverage. And the United States could do that as well, but it would just destabilize the world and it would make things a lot worse. Because I heard people say, well, why doesn't the United States just threaten Russia the same exact way? Well, that would be seen as an escalation when we're this close to ending the war. It's certainly not smart. Not even Biden did that. I mean, they weren't even sending U.S. troops or anything like that. The liberals weren't even doing that. So this is amazing news. You've got this. You've got China. And now the United States is in a better spot with Russia to where there's not going to be this, hopefully there's not going to be this crazy relationship between China and Russia because the liberals were making Russia the number one biggest enemy. And then Russia's like, well, if everyone in the West hates us, obviously Europe hates us. They think we're going to take over all of their countries like a World War II situation. Let's make a really nice alliance with China. Let's look at some of the other Eastern countries. Let's look at North Korea. Let's look at Iran. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. And listen, if this wouldn't be surprising. The regions that they control right now, Russia would say, look, we want to keep these regions. We're in a negotiating period. We know you guys spent a lot of money on this war. We're going to give you some of the minerals. So they're going to have some type of deal where the U.S. gets minerals. I don't know how much they're going to get, but they've done a separate deal with Ukraine. This is a separate thing other than the Ukraine deal, I think. But I'm not exactly sure. This is a weird situation because Ukraine currently does not have access to most of their valuable minerals. They're controlled by Russia. They still have some on the western side in central Ukraine. And maybe that's what they're talking about. I don't know how much it would be for. I mean, probably around $100 billion worth. I know Trump wanted $500 billion. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a number, but it's just the U.S. cost. It's like $150 billion, but I don't know. That was a negotiation, and Ukrainian officials let it be known that, yes, this is a strict negotiation for the amount of minerals we have to give the United States for them to continue supporting us in this war. So that's really the situation, and this is looking pretty good. We'll see what happens. You never know with these things, but if this ends and the United States gets access to some of those minerals, even if so this is good because even if we allow Russia to get that land, that's going to be seen as a big negative. But if we get minerals out of it in an economic relationship with Russia to where they pledge to not reinvade, and we have kind of an actual thing that's attached to that to where we can be partners with Russia, then that will, I think, make some people at least more at peace rather than just a strict deal to where there would be a demilitarized zone. If you actually have the US in a relationship with Russia, that's a good deterrent of them trying to do some type of re-invasion. And there would have to be other deterrents as well. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.